Welcome to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast, where we help you embrace the most courageous version of yourself. My name is Marie, and I'm an adventure seeker who is obsessed with following the joy and creating more freedom. If you're eager for deep conversations, big questions, and meaningful connection, join me on the quest to discovering how we can live a more magical and memorable life. Hello nerds! How are you doing? I'm doing really good. Today is a different episode inspired by one of our listeners' ideas who suggested I share the content of a video I posted on Instagram a few weeks ago. Hello Gabby, thank you for your insight. The message I shared in the video is extremely valuable right now, and I know that not everyone who listens to this podcast watches videos on Instagram, so here's the audio version. I'm going to tell you about how I intend to treat people, not only in my everyday life, but also here on the online space, because it's too easy sometimes to forget that the people we connect with digitally are real humans with real feelings and a right to dignity and respect. I encourage you all to take a moment to also reflect on this question, which becomes more and more important as our lives are increasingly woven with the World Wide Web. And I'm sorry if you're hearing noises in the background. It's Ollie building a gift for Mother's Day. So I'm not gonna stop myself from recording a podcast because he's being a good son. All right, here it goes. Take it away, Marie from the past. Why I want to do this is one, so you know where I stand. Two, so it informs how I'm going to use this platform moving forward. And three, just because I believe it's a question we all need to ask ourselves. How do we believe others should be treated? So that when something happens, we don't just default to how others around us react, and we can turn ourselves to our core and see, how do I want to move forward? What do I think makes for a better world? And then act accordingly, instead of letting others tell us how to act. So I did this work. It's obviously going to evolve with time, and I'm always open to discussions as long as it's done in respect. The first thing I want to share is a moment in the Savage Lovecast podcast that had a huge impact on this reflection of mine. For those of you who don't know the Savage Lovecast, it's Dan Savage's podcast about sex and about love. It's been going on for years. It used to be a column before, and I listened to hours and hours of this podcast back in the days when I didn't know that there was other podcasts on earth. And there was a moment that stuck with me to this day where Dan received a call from a guy who was in tears. And he said, "I'm a pedophile." So was my brother, who committed suicide because he acted on his desires and felt so much shame, he killed himself. The guy was crying. He said, "I know it's wrong. I do not want to have those desires. They are there. I never acted upon them. I hate myself so much. I need help, but I feel like I cannot ask for help, because if I do, I'm going to be isolated and rejected, and I'm going to hate myself even more." And in that moment, the way Dan reacted was so beautiful. He showed so much compassion. He gave this guy who was breaking down, he gave him the gift of dignity. He gave him his dignity back. He said, "You are worthy of love. No matter no matter what you said, you are worthy of love and you are worthy of help. And I don't remember where he directed him and what he told him to do. I'm sure he sent him towards the best resources for his situation. But just, he could have reacted completely differently. Most people would go, oh, you're a bad person. You're a bad person, X. But he found it inside himself to see the other person's humanity. Shame would have led nowhere. Shame led to his brother killing himself. And I want to talk about shame because we've seen a lot of it going on with call-out culture. I have a hard time saying that. Call-out culture, cancel culture, especially here on Instagram in the last year. We point to an individual and their behavior and call them out publicly. I always wonder in those moments, what is the point of the calling out? Is the point, do you want the other person to truly change and become better? Or do you want a forced apology? If you want a forced apology, then the calling out is perfect because the person is in reactive mode and can sit down and think about what words to use to apologize in a way that's gonna please those who are doing the calling out. It's easy. It's a PR job. You can literally sit down and think about, engineer like an apology that makes sense to the group of people you want to please. But if the point of the calling out is for the person to truly change, then I wonder if it's the right way forward. I don't think it is. First, because someone can't change just like this overnight. They have to have self-awareness. Self-awareness is what leads to true change. And you're not gonna go inside yourself and ask yourself the deep questions if you hate yourself, if you're ashamed. If you're ashamed about you, you don't want to go inside of you. It doesn't feel safe. It feels like a place you don't want to be. So it's counterproductive to call someone out publicly. I'm not talking about like a conversation between people. I mean, pointing fingers publicly is counterproductive if we want the person to truly, truly ask themselves the right questions and to interrogate their behavior. One thing I will never do that I see happen more and more is I will never call someone else a piece of shit human. I don't think this exists. There is no piece of shit human. We have to be able to see the difference between someone's core and their behavior. And I think it's a lot more courageous. There is a lot more strength in being able to see common humanity. The difference between core and behavior is, when I think about the core, I think about like a newborn baby that's come into the world. They're pure. They're pure. And then there's layers and layers of conditioning on top of that core that lead to different behaviors. But the mistake that we make is we take the behavior and we make it mean something about the core when it has nothing to do about the core. The behavior is the result of years and years of conditioning, and often the conditioning is not something that the person had any power over. Often that conditioning happened in the first years of their life when they were a child. So if you were a small child and you were not respected, you were not shown proper love, you grow up to be a human with layers and layers of shit over that pure core. So of course there are going to be behaviors that correspond to that. But we make it about the individual themselves. I don't know if you've seen the TV series The Wire. I think it was made in 2005. It was made by HBO, and it's set in Baltimore. There's 5 seasons. We see the politics, the education system, the police system, the drugs, and they study characters in a way that allows us to have empathy for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean the drug lord, the kid who was born in a shitty neighborhood, the corrupted politician, the policeman who kills innocent Black people. We see it all, and we see where they come from and what caused those behaviors, and how it's not about the individual at their core, but the system and the conditioning that they grow in. And like Trevor Noah said in the video he posted a few days ago, if the tree is rotten, the apples are going to be bad. But the way I see it, the apple that grows out of a rotten tree is a bad apple, but at its core, there is some goodness. There is the desire to be a good apple. There is the desire to be a good apple. But for someone to free themselves from those layers and layers of conditioning, there needs to be people who see their core, who believe that there can be some goodness in them, who believe that there is like a spark of good in there. Otherwise, what's the point of changing? What's the point of making the effort to shed those layers of conditioning if no one's willing to see the potential goodness in you? I've done stupid things in the past. I've said things I've regretted, and if they had been filmed publicly, I could have been the victim of a calling out, and I would have easily turned into a rock in the corner hating myself. But I had people, when I opened up about those things that I regretted and that I was ashamed of, when I opened up to my therapist, for example, she's one of them, she reacted like Dan Savage reacted on that call. She saw the goodness in me, and that made me want to change. That made me want to change. People being kind makes you want to be kinder. But it doesn't happen like this, you know? Some people are so far into hatred. We have to keep seeing the common humanity. We have to believe that it's there. What else was I gonna say? I want to be brave to see beyond people's facade. And I also don't want to divide people up. I wanted to sign up to a program earlier this year or last year to learn about racism and how to be a better ally. And this was an online program. When you wanted to sign up, you had to fill in this survey. And in the survey, they asked you about the history of racism in America. And I don't know if you know, but I'm Canadian. I suck at history. I was always super bad in history class. And so that survey, there was lots of things I didn't know about the history of... Oh, Siri thinks I'm talking to it. There was a lot of things I just didn't know. I have a lot to learn for sure about the history of race in America and in Canada. But then this survey would put you in a category, like a level of ignorance category. And then from there, they would take you in the program and teach you what you needed to learn. for me, being put in a category like this was so belittling. And I'm sure it's the same for many people. I want to learn, I want to be better, I want to grow, but I want to learn from people who see me as an equal and from people who see my humanity. I don't want to just be put into a group and be seen as that group. There is nuance. We need more nuance. Another group that we talk about a lot recently is white men. And there is a lot of white men out there who use their power to do awful things. There are a lot of white men who uphold this oppressive system that we live in, patriarchy. But then I look, for example, at my nephew, who's 2.5 years old. He's a short white man, and we're raising him to be a beautiful human, you know. And I say we, I mean his parents, but but I have a lot of love for him. So all those little boys are being raised to be good humans who are going to create a world where everyone is equal. Now, sometimes I think when I see like posts on Instagram with like headlines like white man this and that, white man this and that, I think there's a lot of truth to those posts. Like there's a lot of behaviors that are wrong, but at the same time, I don't want my nephew growing up with a sense of shame about who he is. And I think it's not helpful for anyone to be attached to a group. Africa Brooke, I don't know if you know her, check her out on Instagram, she's amazing. She's black and she lives in London, and she talks about how often she was told that she was not black enough, that she was acting white, and how limited that was for her, how she couldn't be her full self, because if she was her full self, she was told that she was not black enough. Same thing with Trevor Noah in his memoir, Born a Crime. He talks about how his mom is black, his dad is white, and for his whole life, he felt like he didn't belong anywhere because he was never white enough, but he was never black enough. And it's not helpful for anyone to have to belong to a group, to attach themselves to a group. And if I go back to my nephew, I don't want him to grow up feeling like he has to repair the mistakes that white men have done in the past. I want him to grow wanting to create a beautiful future. So I'm not saying forget about the past. I'm saying keep a wise eye on the past, but be solutions oriented, be future oriented. What would we do if we had a wand and we could, you know, stop thinking about what's gone wrong in the past and start thinking about what is possible, what are the possibilities. And as I said, I'm not saying erase the past, keep it in mind, keep a wise eye on the past, but have more emphasis put on what is possible. And my friend Florence was telling me about this concept she read in the Patagonia book, the book Let My People Go Surfing, where in their company they have they were inspired by an indigenous tradition where in a meeting you have someone who represents the 7th generation. So when you're trying to make decisions, this person thinks about the future and about the 7th generation in the future and how this decision is going to impact them and their well-being. And they're there to help make sure that what happens in the present is not is not based on small concerns, but on bigger impact. And I think it's also a good way to go about your own life, about our own life when we try to make decisions. Some of you come to me and you're like, oh, I'd love to do this project, but I've never been good at finishing things. I tried starting a business in the past and it failed. So therefore I shouldn't do this thing I have in mind now because I've proven myself in the past that I was not good at it. That's the wrong way to look at it. That's the limiting way to look at it. It would be so much more helpful and it would serve you and others so much more powerfully if you thought, if I do this thing and if I succeed, what's going to happen 7 years down the line? Who's going to be helped by me doing this thing 7 years down the line, 10 years down the line? How is this going to impact my children, their children? Instead of focusing on the past and the small things from the present, think about how much impact you could have. I think that's much better. And I think from this place of possibility, we feel more empowered. And if we feel more empowered, we can start making changes, small changes around us and big changes that have an impact on the rest of the world. So that's it. It's almost been 20 minutes. That's what I think. I'm never going to do calling out of individuals. I'd rather have conversations and I'd rather find the courage in me to see common humanity. And I believe that if people feel seen, if they are given the benefit of the doubt, then from there they have a more solid foundation to grow and make better decisions. And it also allows them to, it gives them the permission to see other people's humanity. Do you see what I mean? So if someone makes a comment that is closed-minded, if I see their humanity, maybe it opens their mind and they start seeing other people's humanity too. Hope I'm making sense. I'm gonna stop now and let me know what you think. All right. You just listened to the Self-Growth Nerds podcast. I hope you enjoyed. We publish an episode every Monday, so make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified. I want to thank my friend Etienne Garano for editing this, and I want to thank you, kind-hearted souls, for doing the inner work necessary to grow into your truest self and make the world a better, more beautiful place. My name is Marie, and I will talk to you next week.